G. Kelly Dixon here. We have a new setup, so I'm like getting used to these headphones and mics. But progression is an excellent thing, and we have a lot to talk about. It's just so much going on with the economy, and we're ending 2021 on what we hope to be a good note. Can 2021 look as bad as 2020? And unfortunately, the answer is maybe. We have a vaccine now. That's very good. That's rolling out. Hopefully, that'll add some confidence to the market. Jobs seem to be stable. We actually had a decrease in jobless claims. For some reason, I think that's about to go up. I'll touch that in a little bit. We just have a proposed stimulus bill where we have finally Congress and Senate agree to get it through, and now Donald Trump has some gripes, our president, right? And some of the gripes that he has with it is that, for one, he thinks people should get more money. It's kind of crazy for me, particularly him being a Republican and a businessman, to him to actually want to increase the deficit by giving people more money. And sure, in the short run, that makes sense, but in the long run, it really exacerbates our problem. Hey, I want everybody to have money, but obviously I think that the economy does better if people are forced to earn it. And I'm not saying it's fair, but I'm saying that for the holistic vision of America, it does not do us any good to have large deficits. Why? Is because large deficits lead to inflation in the long run, because eventually those debts have to get paid, and they have to get paid with interest. And who gets left holding the bill for that are the American people. So, why is G. Kelly against $2,000 stimuluses that Donald Trump says that there should be in this new stimulus package? Well, let's sort of break this down. The world is filled with producers and non-producers. So, a producer is somebody that produces goods or services, sells them or offers those goods or services for a profit. A non-producer doesn't produce a good or service for a profit. What they do to make money is offer labor. When you give laborers capital, they spend it. When you give producers capital, usually they tend to invest it, further their service or their product business, whatever it is that they do. So what happens now is, when you give everybody $200, $2,000, $600, whatever the case may be, they spend it, so they'll have a few more goods. And at the end of the day, whoever is producing those goods or services are the ones that actually become better off and richer. What happens with that is we actually expand the wealth gap, because we print more money in order to make this happen. It's not just, circumstance. The money just doesn't go out of thin air. Well, it does, but it shifts and goes into the hands of the people that offer those goods and services. And what happens now is that you have more dollars chasing less items. We get inflation, and more importantly, we have the rich getting richer, and the gap between that rich and poor continues to spread. I have no idea in 2020 what $600 is really doing for somebody that has a mortgage or a rent payment, particularly in a state like New York or whatever the case may be. So I don't know if it's for feel good. I don't know if it's charity. I don't even know what you expect to get for $600 that's going to make or break your financial situation. So my thing is, why even give it? And to add another $1,400 to it, it's not really doing much better. I'm sure that the president has way more access to information than I do, particularly on economics and the economy at large. Sure, he has intelligent people around him, and I'm sure he has some intelligence himself. So I don't I don't necessarily buy the more stimulus thing unless you're looking to buy votes. But obviously that campaign is gone and sailed, and we have another candidate that's coming in that looks like they're going to be or trying to spend more money as well, put us more into deficit. So we'll see what happens with that. 600 as for now, $600 is what it is. We'll see if Trump vetoes the stimulus bill. We also have an increase in unemployment benefits, so extra $300 a month. Now, $300 a month. I mean, so $300 a week. I apologize. $300 a week. You have a little bit more incentive or a little bit more money if you are unemployed and you cannot work. So I guess that's a good thing, right? For those that are unemployed. The question is, who's paying for that bill? And we got to understand how the the economy the economy works. There's never anything for free. So if somebody's getting money, somebody has to pay for it. It has to come from somewhere, even if you're just printing it. The reality is that the people that are working, that are paying taxes, they're going to be the ones to subsidize this. So on a state level, obviously this is coming from the federal level, but on a state level, who and the problem with states is that they have just as bad policy as the federal government. The difference is that states can't necessarily knock on the Federal Reserve's door without permission. So, if you look at it from a state level, how does this unemployment fund get funded? Right? It's called tax, right? They take an insurance, they have a payroll tax that they charge employers, and this money is supposed to sit in this insurance so that when people do become unemployed, it kicks in. Now, when you have a run on that money, what essentially happens is that the insurance or the fund is bankrupt. So now we have to borrow money in order to facilitate or make those payments to those that are unemployed. This is on a state level. And in order to pay that money back, we have to figure out how to increase revenue. Now, normally, you still have your parking tickets, your property taxes, all these other revenue streams that states would ordinarily all these other revenue streams that ordinarily would come in. But when you tell people they don't have to pay their mortgage, now all of a sudden they're not paying those property taxes, or people aren't going out as much. There aren't as many parking tickets. So now the revenue is actually down as well. So in essence, these states, they deal with bankruptcy. So they needed the money from the federal government to even sustain themselves. And that was a very big deal, which is why there's obviously funding set aside for states so that they can kind of quote unquote weather the storm. See, when they shut down the first time, most of these states, they went bankrupt. They needed lifelines from the Federal Reserve in order to sustain themselves and actually get through and meet their obligations. We can look at where we're headed with this, but there's not really any way to catch up. I mean, the only way to catch up when you're out of budget, when you have high expenses and you have low revenue, the only way you catch up is to cut expenses. And there seems to be no willingness to cut expenses, not long term. And the reason nobody wants to cut expenses is because spending money gets you votes. So, as politicians, if I have to fire X amount of teachers or X amount of MTA workers, it actually looks bad on my part. The government programs, some of these programs, they get money and fund it, and if they don't spend the money, they actually lose the money. If you could imagine, these organizations that are actually scared not to spend the money, so you get punished for being efficient, which is crazy. I think if you're more efficient, you should get more money. But this is the way it operates, and it's a crazy system. But here we are. So we have a strain on revenue from the federal level and also on the state level. These bailouts are quote unquote needed. We have a great deal of money going to small businesses. We have a great deal of money going to things like childcare, obviously medical facilities, schools. Great deal of money that's being printed. I can't say that this is necessarily a great thing for the economy. We're going to feel the pain in this down the line. It's a subtle pain, but it is a pain nonetheless. So let me explain this pain that we're going to get and our children are going to get. So when we look at standard of living in America, if you go back to the 50s, somebody could go to high school, graduate, get a job in a factory, buy a house, take care of a family. We're talking about one working adult would be able to do all of that with a high school education. You fast forward, where in 2020, 70 years later, that same individual is now 40 years old with a potential fiance living in an apartment and still trying to save up to buy a home, college educated and making more money. Why is that? Nobody asks these type of questions at all. They just assume that this is the way it is. And the reality is that we're selling our future for our present. And when people say, "Oh well, you can print money and there's no issues, or you can just, the government can just keep giving away money." When you're increasing the money supply, what you're doing is you're actually devaluing the dollar, right? Because now there's more dollars chasing less goods. So the goods actually become more valuable. So when you see people print, the government's printing money, which is doing now 900 billion worth, maybe actually 1.4 trillion if you count the other spending. We're adding to the money supply, and we're adding to the money supply. We're devaluing the dollar, so everything against every assets or things you buy with dollars now seem more valuable because the dollar is actually being devalued. So your purchasing power is decreased when you print more money. So the long or the short version of that is inflation. And we're going to continue to see inflation. We see it in the stock market, asset bubbles. We see it in real estate. Pricing shouldn't be this high. Real estate should be more affordable. But because of the money supply, this is what happens. The next generation is going to continue to get harder and harder and harder for them to be able to sustain a living. I mean, you got couples right now that stay together just to pay the bills in some of these areas. Particularly in the cities, they just can't afford to break up. We'll make it work out. It's something that we can actually reverse if we just stop spending money. But we're gonna have to go through some pain. It sucks not being able to spend money. Like sometimes people say you should save money. While you're saving, it sucks because you can't do anything, right? That's why people don't. It's so hard to save because I don't want to think about the future. I want to go out and buy some clothes now. I want to go out and go on a vacation now. I don't want to wait 20 years and worry about that. I want to do it now. Politicians want to get reelected, and obviously, everybody likes a spender. So from a sophisticated standpoint, we understand the mistakes and everything that is happening, and we can make educated bets that that assets that are working against the dollar, and I'm not talking about other currencies, but just assets and commodities in general are going to actually do well against the dollar, which is why we're in real estate, and people should be in silver and gold and things of that nature because those are things that are going to work against the dollar.